Seattle is a beautiful place to live with your family, but for a few months in 1974, its surroundings were the hunting place for one of America's most famous men. When college girls started going missing, with no one to see something or any connection between them, the police thought they were just singular, isolated cases. They couldn't have been any more wrong. Today, we try to get inside one of America's most prolific sexual serial killers. With at least 30 victims, he managed to trick the police until 1978, when he was finally caught. The Cascade Mountain Range separates Washington state into two distinct areas. Near desert areas mainly cover the state's eastern half with hot summers and severe winters. Wildlife is abundant. The soil is primarily acidic, making the region the perfect dumping spot because animals will rapidly devour everything. West Washington, however, is seen as the perfect place to raise a family, a semi-isolated temperate zone that seems safe and clean and makes it ideal for the Healy family. That is, until February 1st, 1974. James and Joyce Healy lived just east of Seattle in a comfortable suburb. They had 3 children, 2 teenagers, Robert and Laura, and Linda, a 21-year-old young lady. Linda Healy was a senior psychology major at the University of Washington. Linda was her mother's favorite. With a sweet voice, wide blue eyes, shoulder-length brown hair, and even a smile full of life, she dreamed of becoming a teacher. She lived with 4 other girls in a 2-story framed house in Seattle's University District. Her room was in the basement and had only one window. Living for almost 4 years in the University District, she felt completely safe to ride her bike each morning before school to a local radio station. She worked as a ski report announcer. It looks like she had no idea that in early January of 1974, a young woman was attacked in her house in the same area that Linda lived. Like Linda, the woman lived in a house with other people and had a basement window bedroom. The man entered her room, thrashed her head repeatedly with a heavy metal rod, and sexually assaulted her with a speculum, causing her extensive internal injuries. She woke up after several months of a coma and no memory of the attack. When Joyce Healy called her daughter's house on February 1st, 1974, she knew immediately something was wrong. After one of the girls told her on the phone that they hadn't seen Linda all day, Joyce immediately called the police. Although the officers that she and Jim met at Linda's house were acting like this was just another normal situation, and that Linda would eventually show up, Joyce knew better. After searching Linda's room, the police discovered a small bloodstain on her pillow and bottom sheet. On her nightgown was found another bright red blotch. Both were A positive. This was Linda's blood type. The officers concluded that the girl had a late-night nosebleed and had simply gone to a hospital. During the following months, the Seattle police found nothing else. Now it was clear that it was not a late-night nosebleed, but something more atrocious. Someone had kidnapped Linda. Not for 1 second did they make a connection between Linda's abduction and the assaulted girl back in January. On March 12th, Donna Gail Manson disappeared 60 miles south of Seattle. She was last seen as she left her dorm on the Evergreen State College in Olympia. Donna was 19. The police were notified about Donna's going missing after 5 days. At first, they considered the possibility of suicide. She was considered to be a moody girl, but when no suicide note nor a body were discovered, it was clear that Donna Manson had been abducted. There was no connection between Linda and Donna, other than that they were both white college girls. April 17, 1974. Central Washington State College, Ellensburg, 120 miles east of Seattle. Susan Elaine Rancourt, a freshman biology major, blue-eyed former cheerleader with dreams of becoming a doctor or research scientist, never returned to her dorm room. She was reported missing by her roommate on the second day to the campus security. Her parents had been notified, and immediately flew down from Anchorage, Alaska. Susan was 19. All three families, the Healys, the Mansons, and the Rancourts, posted rewards, hired private detectives, but nothing was found for months. Oregon State University, Corvallis, 260 miles south of Seattle. Kathy Parks, 21, left her dorm room on the night of May 6, 1974. She was last seen on her way to the Student Union building. It was reported that Kathy was deeply depressed the day of her disappearance. That week, she had a fight by phone with her father and learned from her sister that he had suffered a heart attack. She was a sensitive girl, blonde, and majored in religion. Just like in Donna's case, the police believed that Kathy might have killed herself. After she was reported missing, they searched around the campus for her body. When nothing was found, a flyer was sent to the regional police agencies, just like for the three previous victims. Again, no connection had been found. In June, 2 other girls were taken, Brenda Ball, 22, and Georgianne Hawkins, 18. On June 1st, around 2 in the morning, Brenda Ball walked out of a tavern and was never seen from again. On June 17th, the King County Police Department was notified about Brenda's missing by her mother. She was not a college girl, and so far was the oldest. On June 12th, Seattle Times reported that the day before, Georgianne Hawkins, a University of Washington co-ed, disappeared on her way to the sorority house. That was the first time when it was made a tentative public suggestion that a serial killer was loose. The report said that the police are looking for any possible links between the disappearance of Georgianne Hawkins and the February 1st disappearance of Linda Ann Healy, also a University of Washington co-ed. Janice Ann Ott, 23, and Denise Marie Naslund, 19, were both abducted and murdered on July 14th. They were both taken from Lake Sammamish's shores. The investigation of their disappearance fell to the King County Police. They were also handling the unsolved case of Brenda Ball. Bob Keppel, a 31-year-old slender and intense detective, was the point man of the investigation almost from the start. He continued this work for 15 years. During his inquiry, it was the first time the name Ted came into view. After re-examining the Rancourt case, it was Keppel who conceded that Ted not only might have abducted Susan Rancourt 120 miles east of Seattle, but that he had traveled that distance at least twice to go hunting at Central Washington State College. It was Keppel who finally linked Ted with the other victims. The process was deductive, and the possibility was low. The summer passed with no new victims and no progress in any of the old cases. On September 4th, 1974, bird hunting season began. A group of hunters drove over Issaquah hillside and made a devastating discovery. Along an abandoned road that cut across the slope, one of the hunters saw the remains of a human body. The Issaquah police called the King County detectives. A team led by Bob Keppel began the search of the area. The outcome was terrifying. Within a 150-foot radius, the searchers found 26 bones and 8 clumps of dark brown and reddish blonde hair. Dr. Dennis Swindler, a forensic anthropologist from the University of Washington, identified the remains as Denise Naslund and Janice Ott. In that same area was also discovered an extra femur, meaning a third girl had been dumped there, but only years later was her identity established. 1974 ended without any new victims since the events from Lake Sammamish. But the storm was about to hit again. Saturday, March 1st, 1975. 2 students were hiking 10 miles east of Issaquah and 4 miles south of US 90, just on the lower slopes of Taylor Mountain. They stumbled over a human skull. Keppel sealed the entire mountainside around the skull and sent the remains to Seattle. Brenda Carol Ball had finally been found. Last seen alive at the famed tavern, she found her ending on Taylor Mountain. Her skull had a gaping fracture. After 8 days of searches, the results were heartbreaking. Susan Rancourt's skull was next to be discovered, and by Keppel himself. Her skull, too, was cracked. The third skull belonged to Kathy Parks. The killer brought her 260 miles north and left her for the animals to feed on. The last one to be discovered was the first one to be murdered. Based on Joyce Healy's words, her eldest child, Linda, was identified based on a single tooth. The cause of death was yet to be concluded. If the cranial fractures were human-made, they would have required the use of a heavy blunt instrument and an enormous level of strength. After Ted dumped the bodies near the roadside, taking care to remove all jewelry and clothing, the animals simply took care of the rest. The soft tissue was consumed near the dumping spot, and the heads and bones were torn away and carried back into the brush. Now Bob Keppel was able to trace a timeline. The early victims were left on Taylor Mountain. Then, in June, Ted moved closer to Seattle, in Issaquah. Donna Gail Manson was still to be found or identified. Her remains were not on Taylor Mountain, but next to Denise Hosland and Janice Ott was still an unidentified femur. No other dumping ground was found after Taylor Mountain, but others still can exist. The girls had been found, but no one knew the killer's identity or where he was now. Bob Keppel will soon find that Ted moved to Utah in September of 1975.